Wow. When Jan first called me and we had our first conversation, this is how he tempted me to say yes. Of course, the Rock of Gibraltar was very enticing. But when he said we would start with the sea of beautiful young faces, the students of Gibraltar, I said, how can I say no to that? And after the introduction by your Minister of Education, I'm just thrilled to be here. My vision, because today we are here to share with you our visions of transformation. And my vision of transformation is this: that everyone, all of humanity, the theme of this year's festival is humanity's uprising. And my vision is that all of humanity will rise up and realize that we now have the creativity, the human potential, the desire to transform this moment in history, which seems like a time of collapse and destruction, a drama of destruction. But we will rise up to transform it into a theater of transformation. All of you are learning history, and we certainly learned a lot of history in school. It was a history that was written by a few people, primarily of battles, of conquests. You will step forward and become the script writers, the directors, the actors, the artists of our story, of your individual story and our collective story. My dream is that every human being, the young ones who are already doing it because you still have your creativity right here in you, and all of us who are a little more advanced in age, but not too much, will discover that we are all creators of our own lives, and together we are co-creators of our shared future. And that is exactly what we are here in Gibraltar for. But how did this vision come to me? I was growing up in India. The first 18 years of my life, my Rock of Gibraltar, my universe was India. I didn't have a passport. I'm sure all of you have already traveled many, many times out of the Rock of Gibraltar. I didn't till I was 18. And as I was growing up, in those days, it still was important. A guy could be a guy, but a girl had to somehow be a great artist so that one day she would be a good bride. So my parents tried their best. They sent me to learn not the piano, but the veena and the sitar. I was useless. They sent me to sing Hindustani music. Zero, I had no ear. They said, okay, go and dance, not ballet, but Bharatnatyam. Absolutely nada. I was singularly untalented. I thought I wrote good poems, but my poems never rhymed. So people kind of looked away and felt embarrassed for me. And all my stories that I loved were all based on the people I met in the streets of my country, in the backyards, behind the buildings where we lived, the servants, so to speak, who cleaned up the mess that we made. And all their stories were so heartbreaking and courageous. But when I would write their stories, my teachers would say, oh, you are too wildly imaginative. Maybe in Bollywood, a film could be made about this, but this is not real life. We don't like it. So then I decided, well, I will follow the passion of my life, which is transformation, which is transforming our societies, the injustice in our societies, all the suffering that human beings impose on others, and our structures, our systems, religions, politics imposes upon people. I wanted to find out how to change that. And I figured I won't need my creativity. It doesn't matter if I'm not creative. Let me ask you, because there are lots of young people, so I'm sure I'll get a positive response. How many of you would say you are artists? And the grown-ups you need to answer to. Just lift up your, yes! More, are you artists? How many of you would say you are creative? Many more, right. And how many of you were like me at that time would say you are singularly uncreative and definitely not artists? good news around the corner. That was me till a few years ago. Okay, so I followed my passion, did politics, international relations, was working on conflict, did my PhD at the University of Cambridge, not far from your minister who studied at Oxford, and I went out with all my big PhD in how to solve the conflicts, starting off with Africa and restore justice. And luckily then, I stopped talking and started listening to all the people I was meeting who were affected by conflict in all the conflicts of Africa that I worked on. And I started looking at how they resolve conflicts. And then suddenly one night, in the middle of a mission in Somalia, boom, it came to me. It's art. It's creativity that will end the conflicts and bring peace. But I said to myself, all those were not artists and creative? I'm not an artist. What am I going to do with that? So I figured I'd do what I do best. I would examine it, I would analyze it, I would talk to people and ask them, what is this art thing about? Why do you paint? Why do you sing songs in the middle of conflict when you should be maybe feeding your kids or running away? I kept doing that for a long time, and the message kept coming. It's art. And I kept myself busy, but I kept talking to artists and people in areas and the conflicts I worked in. And one day, only 4 years ago, and I was old by then, I was past 45. Suddenly, instead of talking about the power of art and creativity, I realized that I was actually, not me, I was a basket full of stories, full of the voices, the visions, the deep insights and wisdom of all the people I had ever met who had touched my life and shown me how in the midst of crisis, when you think nothing is possible, when you've given up all hope, like many of us feel today, with all the problems of climate change and conflict and the refugee crisis and financial crises, when they face these problems, they didn't give up and become victims for life or perpetrators or just bystanders. A day came where they stepped on stage. And they went from being observers, passive observers or bystanders or victims, to becoming witnesses and saying, I take a stand. And the moment they did that, what happened? It was like a miracle. They automatically became artists and creators. Where nothing seemed possible, new possibilities just mushroomed in front of their eyes, in their ears, in their hearts, under their fingers. They began to smell and see possibilities they didn't know. And when they did that, it became clear what the vision was. What is my vision to change this impossible situation? And their realization that if I want to change the situation, oops, it starts in here. I need to change something in myself. And when they did that, when they became the change, when they radiated and embodied the vision of all those ideas they had, boom, it became like a magnet. And they began to attract an ecosystem of allies so they could bring about collective change in their societies and ripple that change into the world. And I realized that even though every story, every person who touched me with their capacity to transform was so different, because they came from all parts of the world, but this pattern, which has become the process of theater of transformation, there was some resonance. And you just mentioned that of all your passions for art, you chose biology. And one of the first people who inspired me when I was very young was Wangari Maathai. And she, like you, she loved many things, but she loved plants. She loved figuring out, how does a tadpole become a frog? And she was the first African woman to get a PhD in biology and the first African woman to get the Nobel Peace Prize for being an environmentalist, like you. Or like Van Nath, who told me, I survived the torture camp, S-21, in the genocide in Cambodia. And even now, as an old man, I keep painting the signs of torture and genocide because I don't want people to forget. I don't want people to repeat what happened. or my great, great mentor, who lived till the age of 100 after surviving and escaping the Holocaust. She moved from Prague to Ecuador. And she told me, you know, we get so attached to our suffering, but our suffering takes us round in circles with no exit. We need to know how to bury the past so the new can emerge. Don't get stuck in the past. Don't lose yourself in imagining the future. Live the present moment. Your power is here. Now, live it. And she lived it till she was 100. Or Hans-Peter Dürr, the great quantum physicist who taught me, you know, we believe that the answers lie in certainty. It's by holding on tight to what we know that we will have security. But you know, it is wrong. It is by letting go of everything we know. That is when we find the answers. Because life is like a dance. And this man, till he died at the age of 85, was dancing. And so it is that wherever we go, when we face crisis, we are not alone. We are accompanied by all of the people who have touched and inspired us. And that is my invitation now to all of us here, that the next time you have a difficult situation, think of one person who inspires you, whether it's someone in your life, a comic character, a hero in a film, someone who does courageous things. And imagine them there, and then take a step towards them and become them. And then look back at yourself and your problem from their eyes. And think what that person would say to you. What advice, what voice would come out of them to guide you? What's the impact of this been? That when I went from being an academic, a policy advocate, a peace activist, to also being a poet and an artist, I began to co-create with others, and I could see the impact this had on everyone from political leaders, policymakers, ministers, students, peace activists, grassroots activists, victims of conflict. And right now, we've created the Theatre of Transformation Academy together with people from around the world, and a new generation of young leaders is stepping forward. There are 12 of them already who say, we want to be shaping the next generation of change. We want to be shaping our shared future. So I invite us all to take up this vision of transformation, to step up and write our story and enact personal and global transformation. Thank you.